We're looking at Chapter 8 of the sample exam, and that was sinusoidal functions. In this chapter, we looked at graphs and equations of sinusoidal functions, and we looked at the characteristics such as amplitude, range, their max and mins, period, midline, and we looked at some word problems in sinusoidal functions. So our first multiple choice is number 40. What is the midline equation for the graph shown below? And the midline is halfway between the max and the min, which in this case is between 4 and 2, would be up 3, 1, 2, 3. So our midline would be right here at y equals -1. If we were asked to find, this could be the same type of question again, and we could be asked the amplitude. In this case, it would be 1, 2, 3 would be the amplitude. The maximum would be 2. The minimum would be -4. We could also be asked the range, which is between the minimum and the max. That's between the minimum and the max, which is -4 is less than y is less than 2. We could also be asked the period, and when you're asked the period, you could look on the graph here. It is a sine graph, since the first point is on the midline, and it goes from 0 degrees. Your period goes is the domain, so it goes from 0 degrees back to the midline at 180, and it would be 180 degrees for this period. So if we're looking at multiple choice number 41, what is the amplitude and maximum value for each function? And we're looking at the equation. An equation of a sinusoidal function would be f of x or y equals a sine b x subtract c plus d. And our amplitude will always be a, and our maximum will be d plus a. And so that gives our amplitude to be 2. C and D are gone. And our maximum value is going to be d plus a, which our d is 1. So it's going to be 1 plus 2, which would be 3. So that gives us a for an answer. We could have also been asked here, given the equation, we could have been asked the period. And the period, if you recall, is 360 over b. And so the period here would be 360 degrees over 3, which would be 120 degrees. We could have been asked the midline here. And the midline, when you determine the midline from an equation, that is equal to d. So our midline is y equals 1. All these things they could give us an equation and ask us any of these characteristics of sinusoidal functions. The graph of which function has a period of 180 degrees. And to find period, we have the period equals 360 divided by b. And so if we were trying to figure out basically what our b are, we have a b here of 1/2, and here b is 1. Here b is 1 as well. And here our b will be 2. And so we could take each one of these options, and we could substitute our b's into the formula to determine which one has a period of 180 degrees. Or we could solve the equation 180 degrees will equal 360 degrees divided by b, and solve for b. So we have 180 degrees to equal 360 over 2. So our b must be 2, which will give us d. What is 4 pi over 9 radians in degrees? If you're changing from radians to degrees, we have 4 pi over 9. We're going to multiply. When we go from radians to degrees, you multiply by 180 over pi. if you're going from degrees to radians, you would multiply by the reciprocal, pi over 180. So the pi's cancel out, and that would give us 4 times 180 over 9, which gives us 80 degrees. What is the domain of the function 4 cos x plus 2? And the domain, of course, is the x values. And we have here our domain is going to be x belongs to a set of real numbers. We have a graph of a cos function would look something like this. It's a wave, and it can continue going. X could be a set of reals. There's no restriction on x, and of course, this would be a range since it involves y. This would be range values, and of course, we know for sinusoidal functions, range can't be a set of reals since there is restrictions between its maximum and min. The graph of the function y equals 4 cos 3x has an amplitude doubled, and its period is halved, which represents the new function. So its amplitude will have to do with A, and its period has to do with B. So if our amplitude is A, then we would have, and it's doubled, then that would give us 8 for A. So now B and A are taken out of it. And you might want to say its period is half, so you want to take 3 and you're going to go 3 over 2, and that would be a mistake. If the period is half, let's have a look at this one. The period here would be 360 divided by 3 over 2, which is 360 times 2 over 3, which would give us 240. The period here is 360 divided by 3, which equals 120. Here we have the period is going to be 360 divided by 6, which equals 60 degrees. So its period, which you're looking for the one where the period is half, and that it will be D, period of 60, and this is a period of 120. So be very careful. Sometimes it's not all just looking at the equation, and this is because B is in the denominator here. So here's a constructed response. I use the sinusoidal function shown below to answer the questions that follow. You have to determine the amplitude, period, equation of the midline, and the range from a graph. We would have to do this as well from an equation. But if we have a maximum at 1 and a minimum at 3, then our midline, that's 4 is the difference. So our midline is going to be halfway in between, which would be 1. So that's where our midline is. So y equals -1 is our midline. Now to find our amplitude is the distance from the midline to the maximum or the midline to the minimum, which is going to be 1, 2. So our amplitude is 2. Our period is how long it takes to go from maximum to maximum. And we have here, we're going up by 30, so this is 30, 60, 90, 120. The maximum starts here at 0, so here's our period, and that would be 120 degrees. And the range has to do with the minimum and the max, and our minimum is -3, it's less than or equal to y is less than or equal to our maximum, which is 1, and y belongs to a set of real numbers. In the second part, it says use the information in part 1 to determine the function that represents the graph of the form this. And we have, since our A is 2, it's going to be y equals 2 because A is our amplitude. Cos B is going to be, since it's 360 divided by B, and that's going to equal 120, then our B has to be 3x, and our D is our midline, equation of the midline. Let's subtract 1. So we have on the public exam, multiple choice number 34 to 39 will be from chapter 7. Sorry, that should be chapter 8. Should be chapter 8, sinusoidal functions. And the constructed response items from Chapter 8 will be number 58. In that case, you will, we had a straightforward graph here. We could also be given an equation and ask for those things, all those characteristics, amplitude, and range. And we could also be given a word problem and asked to and asked for certain things, certain characteristics.